All right, so Governor, let's start with the fact that we just heard recently from the mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, talked about how she said she greatly appreciates the surge of officers. And the statistics show that in D.C., they have seen a 45% reduction in violent crime, and the carjackings are down 87%. With the results that D.C. has seen, do you still believe that you don't want the federal assistance from the White House?
Oh, I do want federal assistance. I absolutely want federal assistance.
In the form of the National Guard?
No, because the National Guard is not an effective form of federal assistance. You know, federal assistance that I think could actually be very helpful is being able to do things like making sure that we can surge FBI and ATF agents and bureaus within the area. And by the way, those are all things that were proposed to be cut by the president's budget. You know, a federal surge of assistance can mean things like supports for local law enforcement, because I do believe that you need more local law enforcement on the ground, but that's not things that's included inside of federal supports. That I would love to see more supports for gun violence prevention platforms. That's things that, frankly, that the President of the United States cut by $30 million. And so I want federal support, because I think that if we can have a strategy of actually working in unison and working together in ways that we have done before, being able to add, the way we've done in the state of Maryland, historic investments in local law enforcement, historic investments in technologies and predictive analytics, making Maryland one of the only states in the country that helps to fund the U.S. attorney out of balance sheet, so we can move many of these crimes to federal crimes. So, like, there's a whole lot that I would love to have for federal assistance, but the idea that means mobilizing the National Guard is not sustainable. It's costing over $1 million a day in Washington, D.C., and frankly, a lot of these Guard members are doing things like picking up trash. That it's not scalable. You're not going to do that in every major American city. And frankly, it's deeply disrespectful to the members of the National Guard, because I take very seriously that I am the Commander-in-Chief of the Maryland National Guard. I know what they're trained for. I know what we train them on. And municipal policing is not one of those things. And so I just find it deeply disrespectful to them and to their family members.
But if you say that it's not working or it's not sustainable, we're seeing the results from what is happening in Washington, D.C. How can you argue that it's not effective? I
would love to have a serious conversation with the President of the United States or members of his administration about this, and to say that, you know, that if we want to talk about, okay, here's capital, here's money, how would you use it, and what do you think is the most effective way to use it in the city of Baltimore or in the state of Maryland? I can give a full list of things that I would love to be able to work with them on. You know, what they can do whatever they want in Washington, D.C., but in Maryland, in our state, I believe that we can have a real core strategy to work together to be able to utilize federal supports to kind of continue driving the kind of results, the encouraging results that we're seeing, but that's not what we're hearing from the White House right now.
If the White House is offering federal assistance in the form of law enforcement, which could include FBI and ATF agents, if that's what you're asking for, why not have that conversation?
I'm ready to have that conversation right now.
But do you think having the back and forth and having this criticism with the president on national television and on social media is going to have that conversation unfold?
I'm not interested in having a back and forth with the president. This is not personal between me and the president.
You called him President Bone Spurs.
No, what this is I'm going to fight for my people. And when I'm hearing attacks on our state and on our state's largest city, things like hellhole and hellscape and deathscape, when I'm seeing what's already happened from this administration, where we have now watched FEMA funding eliminated for Western Maryland, despite the fact that we hit and exceeded every single criteria for federal disaster relief, when we've seen how the President of the United States has fired now over 12,000 Marylanders who are federal workers, which, by the way, is the largest number of firings we've seen anywhere in the country, and that does not include our government contractors, and that does not include uniformed personnel. When we have seen how the President of the United States has cut a $250 million from rural health care, and now is pushing around 250 million Marylanders to lose their health care. So yes, I do have a deep problem in the fact that I feel like the federal government, that our state is under attack from the federal government. But if the President of the United States at any time wants to have a serious conversation about how not to fight us, but how to fight for us, I would be very excited to have that conversation with him.
We know the BPD, the Baltimore Police Department, is understaffed, severely understaffed. We hear often hundreds of officers short. The same thing is true in Washington, D.C. We hear Muriel Bowser talk about that as well. She also said that having the impact of the federal surge has helped with the presence of law enforcement and helped with people in the community feel safe. Do you think that would be the same case here in Baltimore if the federal government sent federal law enforcement here?
Yeah, I mean, I look at in Maryland where I've made the largest investments in local law enforcement in the history of the state of Maryland.
But we're talking about federal support right now from the White House.
No, but and that includes over $50 million to BPD alone, and there's still shortages. So if the federal government says, let us help you, let us actually double down on the support that the state has given to local law enforcement, I would absolutely welcome that.
In the form of sending additional agents from the federal government.
Absolutely. If we're talking about doing things like strengthening the FBI bureaus and the ATF bureaus and that type of thing in our cities, then 100%. I'm very willing to have that conversation. But the thing I want to do is make sure you're using the right tool for the right challenge. And when I hear things like we are going to mobilize the Maryland National Guard, my first answer is you don't have the authority to do that. I'm the Commander-in-Chief of the Maryland National Guard. But the second piece is this: that's not the right tool for what we're actually trying to accomplish. But if we want to have a conversation about the right tools, and that includes FBI, ATF, all these other things, then I am very excited to have that conversation with the White House.
You and other Democratic governors yesterday just sent out a statement saying that this was an abuse of power from the president to continue threatening to send in the National Guard. It's a different message than what we're hearing from the mayor of D.C. Do you disagree with what she's recently said?
I frankly don't know exactly what the mayor of D.C. has said, so I can't speak.
I can read you the quote. She said, "We greatly appreciate the surge of officers."
And I appreciate her opinion. I also think there's a distinction between saying we welcome federal supports and we want to mobilize the National Guard, because one, I think, actually focuses on performance. The other is performative, and I don't think any of our neighborhoods want performative right now.
But they're seeing results.
I know as the governor of this state and as the commander-in-chief of our National Guard, I don't want performative, and I take too seriously the responsibility that I have to these men and women who wear the uniform, these citizen soldiers. I take too seriously the responsibility that I have to their family members. When the pledge that I don't just make to them, the pledge that I make to their family members is I will never utilize you for things that I find to be performative or political. That when I mobilize the National Guard, we are talking about sincere cases of natural disasters, traumatic incidences, overseas conflict, things that they're actually trained on. But no, I do not feel that in a moment when we are having encouraging results, but we've got so much more we've got to do to make people safe in our communities, that the answer is let's do something performative and not let's actually double down on what we know actually works.
Looking at taking the National Guard out of this conversation and looking at this continuous back and forth that has played out on the national media and on social media between you and President Donald Trump. Since the National Guard has been deployed in D.C. on August 11th, you've been on national TV 9 times. Is what you're doing really best for the people of Maryland and the people of Baltimore, or is it best for Wes Moore's political career?
My only concern is the people of Maryland. That's it. And that's what I'm fighting for. You're never going to hear me talk about what this means for me personally. It's only about what it means for our folks. And when I'm watching the kind of attacks that our folks are facing right now, when I'm watching the fact that we're watching tariff policies that are raising the prices on everything from the clothes that people are buying as they're getting ready to send their kids back to school, to the food that people are eating, to their energy prices. Energy prices have risen by 10% nationally since the President of the United States has come on board. It's about them. And there is nothing that I will not do to make sure that my people are protected. When I say leave no one behind, and when I say that I learned that at 17 in the Army, I meant that, and I take that very seriously. And that is not just a statement, it really is a governance philosophy. And that's why we are focusing on making sure that the people of our state, even in this moment, where we are watching this assault from the federal government and an assault from the Trump administration, Trump-Vance administration, that our people are going to be okay.
Now we're seeing the possibility of the president talk about clawing back funding for the Key Bridge because of this back and forth that has played out. I spoke with Congressman Andy Harris, who said that Maryland could pay for the rebuild if the state wanted to. It has the money to do so. He said that if the state of Maryland wouldn't spend money on suing the Trump administration as often as it did, it could perhaps pay for the rebuild.
Yeah, I deeply disagree with Congressman Harris, and I think it completely misses the larger point, because people forgot, or he seems to forget, what actually happened. That we had a ship the size of 3 football fields slam into the Key Bridge, and the Key Bridge then collapsed instantaneously, a bridge that was close to 2 miles long, that didn't just fall, it fell because of not a natural disaster, but by negligence. And we're currently in litigation to make sure that the dolly and the operator are going to be the ones to pay for it, where Lloyd's of London has indicated that this is going to be the most expensive maritime tragedy in our nation's history. And while I'm deeply proud of how the state of Maryland put on a case study on how to work together and to respond in a moment of crisis, I also know that the 100% cost share, which, by the way, was voted on by a bipartisan group of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, so the president doesn't have the authority to say he can claw back. That was voted on by Congress. And what the 100% cost share says is that the state is doing its share. The state has already put in over $350 million from insurance and also is fronting the construction costs with the expectation that there be reimbursement. That's how the cost share works. And so I just deeply disagree with Congressman Harris saying that, oh, the state should just cover it, and completely forgetting why we're in this situation in the first place.
Congress could vote to take away the money. That's happened in the past to, pull funding back. So that could happen in the future. If that does, and all of this was sparked because of this back and forth, would you feel any regret by how you've handled this situation?
First of all, nothing would be sparked by a back and forth. Again, I want to be clear about what was going on long before the president threatened to put the Army in our streets or try to pull bridge funding away from something that he never authorized in the first place, right? So let's be clear about the assault that the state of Maryland has been under and the people of Maryland have been under since the Trump administration came on board. The second thing is, if Congress wants to vote to do something that is going to fundamentally hurt our nation's economy, again, the Port of Baltimore supplies 2/3 of this country with goods. It's the largest roll-on, roll-off provider in the entire country. It's one of the largest providers of everything from spices and sugars. I mean, it is the place where American goods go to market and where the market's goods come to the United States of America. If we are going to watch Congress be so partisan and so petty that they are willing to make an adjustment on something that was the greatest maritime tragedy in our nation's history, then Congress would have a whole lot to answer for to the American people when they see the kind of economic damage that would do.
I want to go back to looking at something that you often say is a hallmark of your administration. And, I've covered your administration from the beginning, and you say that you are data-driven and you listen to the numbers. Public safety is a #1 priority for you. If that's true, which you say that it is, and you've talked about all of the funding that you've dedicated to public safety, and the data is what leads your decisions. Looking at the data and what we've seen play out since the weeks of the surge of federal law enforcement, which is more than just the National Guard in Washington, D.C., why are you so opposed to having the same thing here?
I'm not opposed to federal support.
But if that's...
I encourage federal support. I would love for there to be data-driven federal supports that could come on board. I would love for us to focus on how are we getting FBI and ATF bureaus fully staffed inside of our cities. I would love to know, what can we do to actually get ghost guns out of our neighborhoods and work with Congress on that. I would love to be able to have a conversation about how can we make sure that gun violence prevention platforms are being fully funded, because these are data-driven platforms. The thing that I am opposed to is doing the theatrical, which is having the people in military fatigues walking around neighborhoods as if that is a reason that you are going to decrease violence inside of society. Again, it is not sustainable. It is not scalable. And it's deeply disrespectful to the members of the National Guard, who are now being asked to take on a municipal policing mission that they're not trained for and they're not prepared for. But because they look good in their uniform, that's enough to justify it. So the reason that I'm against it is not because I'm not following the data. The reason I am against it, that specific ask, is because I am data driven. And I do not believe in utilizing our brave men and women for missions that are political opportunism.
But the data shows that what is happening in D.C. has seen a reduction in crime.
There is no data that shows that having National Guardsmen picking up litter is what is driving down crime. Now, you could talk about some of the other things that they're doing, and again, all things that I am more than willing to have a conversation on. But there is no data that shows that because you have National Guardsmen from Mississippi walking around and raking mulch at Union Station, that that's somehow reducing violent crime in Washington, D.C. And listen, I'm encouraged. I love the fact that we're watching this continued downward trend in Washington, D.C. that we've seen now for a year. That's been wonderful. And I want to make sure that we are doing the things that can continue the downward trend that we're seeing in the state of Maryland as well. Like, I just think this is a deeply serious issue. And I just want to make sure that we're being serious about the way we're addressing it.
Have you had any conversations or tried to have any conversations with the White House or any members of the administration in the last couple of weeks since all of this kind of escalated to try and de-escalate the situation and talk about what you are asking for the sustained federal assistance?
Yes, we've tried to have conversations both in terms of private conversations and also with letters that we've sent out. You know, the letter that I sent to the president.
The visit? For the visit,
which I want people to read the letter. Because for him to say that I sent him a nasty, and I actually thought that letter was deeply respectful because it was sincere. I really want him to do what I literally did earlier today, which is actually walk around our neighborhoods and walk around our communities and talk to our neighbors. I want him to be able to see firsthand what the mayor and the state's attorney and our local law enforcement are seeing every day, and have a conversation with us about what aspects and items would actually be useful. That is a very sincere offer, and it's one, frankly, that still stands. I would love for the president to be able to take me up on that and not make these jabs at me from the Oval Office or say, Governor Moore, clean up your city and then I'll go for a walk. Listen, I know these communities, and I'm very safe and secure in them. And I want the president to know you'd be very safe and secure too. But come walk with us and come learn, come be educated. And so you're not just making these random and deeply ignorant comments about our people from the Oval Office. Instead of talking about us, talk with us, because I think we're going to be able to get a lot more done.
I appreciate your time, Governor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.